Hi everyone, thanks for joining our latest quick take session on Replicator. Today we're going to be talking about configuring Replicator for bidirectional replication in direct mode. All right. My name's Pat McNally and I am the lead for the Replicator product. Let me stop this and start again. Hi everyone, thanks for joining our latest Replicator quick take. This one is covering the topic of configuring Replicator for bidirectional replication in direct mode. My name is Pat McNally and I'll be taking you through this topic today. Okay. So just a couple quick slides before we start. We're going to go to slide 2 here. Here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about enabling the web applications. We'll review and we'll discuss the options that are on that configure web application screen. Creating replication groups. What is a group and why would you use one other than what the default group is? Step 3 is creating a replication connection. So what is that connection and how do we configure it? And we'll look at some common error messages when you're creating a connection. And then we'll also look at creating a map family and choosing the correct scope and some map family basics. Okay. You'll notice that these are laid out in steps. So step 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is actually the procedure that you have to follow to actually get Replicator configured, no matter what configuration you're actually working for. You have to enable your web application first. You can create replication groups. This step is optional. And step 3, you do have to create a replication connection and a map family. And as I'm going through the interface, I'll point out how you have to do it for each farm. Okay. Something else I also wanted to talk about a little bit, I'd like to cover with each quick take that I do, is what reference materials are available. So some of these guides are actually very useful and have a lot of this information that I'm talking about. One of the guides that that is very useful is the Replicator Advanced Install Guide. There's also a Replicator Administration Guide. There's also a Quick Start Guide. There's a few guides there that will walk you through and help you set up Replicator in a few scenarios. Other guides of interest that I always talk about are the changelog and Replicator Known Issues, and the command line reference guide. So changelog tells you everything that's new for that particular version. Known issues tells you everything that's known as an outstanding issue for that version. And that command line reference guide is really a good a reference if you do a lot of scripting or you like PowerShell. Most of the things that you can do in Replicator can be scripted. All right. Also, what you should be aware of is our knowledge base at www.metalogix.com/support/knowledge-base.aspx. That's actually a knowledge base where any common issues have been logged as articles, and you should have access to that as a customer. These videos are also posted at that site. Okay. All right, so without further wait, we're going to jump into the actual product itself and take a look at how we set all this up. Okay. So what I have displayed here is basically, this is one of my test environments. I have 2 servers. One is called Support 2010A, and the other is Support 2010B. Now these represent 2 SharePoint farms. Okay. Now, as I was mentioning, the first step to actually getting these farms talking is you actually have to enable the web application. So whenever you go to Application Management, you'll see our options under Application Management. First one that you want to click is Configure Web Application. Now on this farm, I already have it enabled. We're going to go through these options, and I'll explain what some of these are. So first step, whenever you first come into this screen, you have to choose the web application that you want to replicate. You can change it based on what you need. Okay. For us, it's going to be my site at port 80. You can choose to enable domain remapping, and domain remapping is exactly how it sounds. If you're replicating between farms in different domains, you want to turn on domain remapping, because that'll automatically try to remap the domain. So the only caveat is you have to have a users that are named the same on those two different domains. So if you have, domain A, John Smith, you have to have a domain B, John Smith, for this to work properly. Otherwise, it'll remap unknown inbound users to either your site collection owner or your system count, depending what you select here. There is also an option to create your own user mapping table. So you can actually, if you are replicating to an environment where the users wouldn't be the same at all, you can actually remap those users to users of your choice. And this is, you create basically a simple XML file telling you who it is on the source, who it will be on the destination, and then you import that file using the command line. And that's covered in the command line reference guide that I was mentioning earlier, and also the administration guide. Okay. So some of the maintenance settings, this is how long packages are retained after they're completed successfully. By default, it's a day. You can keep it up to indefinitely, or a month, a couple weeks, etc. The length of time to keep entries in the event processing log. So we have a log where we actually keep track of all the events that we've processed in the last, for example, 5 days. We'll keep a rolling log of that, and then whenever that log fills up, it'll get rid of the older items in that. It's kept in a SQL table, and you can access it to see what events have been processed. Okay, package processing settings. So we offer at the web application level, and we'll see this again down at the connection level. We'll see the ability to basically control some of the processing. And we won't talk too much about it now, but I want to cover the options. So event capture, the idea of event capture in replication is replication is completely event-based. So whenever you actually turn on a web app and have a map family created, which we'll see later, it'll start capturing events. This gives you the ability to basically turn off capture. If you don't want, for whatever reason, you don't want to capture events for that web application anymore, but you still want it enabled, you would come in here and actually turn off event capture. Okay, this means you would lose any changes that happen during that time. So this button you don't want to normally have off. Okay, pausing inbound and outbound package processing. What this will do is it'll basically stop just the processing of those events. It'll keep the events, it'll keep capturing events, but it won't actually do anything with them. It'll leave them in the database, and they'll be actioned whenever you turn it back, switch it back to no. Okay. You also at this point get the option to choose where your replication packages will go. Whenever replication is happening, it happens via zip packages and also web calls. So this is basically the holding spot for those intern zip files. So we capture an event, we package it, it goes into this directory, it's scheduled to be transported to the destination downloads it, unpacks it, applies it. Okay, so these are the directories that house those packages. This cache path has to do with our technology that we have called differencing compression. What this allows you to do, and we'll see a setting for this later in the connection as well, is this actually lets you do block level differencing. And I'll explain that a little bit more when we get to the connection itself. All right. And if you're using a network file share, which we recommend, you need to specify the user count that will have access to those two directories. Okay. And under advanced settings, okay. So this will actually allow you to set a passphrase for whenever you're using firewall mode. So basically, what firewall mode is, and again we'll see this later in the connection. What firewall mode is, it actually allows you to replicate through a firewall using a one-way port opening. So, for example, your intranet replicating out to your extranet. The extranet may not have the ability to come back into the intranet, so you would use a firewall mode. And what this does is it gives you an extra layer of security for packages going through there. We want to make sure that we're only talking to the destination that you've given a passphrase for. So nobody could set up replication and fake basically a different endpoint. Okay. All right. So once you have that enabled, you click OK, and what happens at this point is a timer job gets set, and that basically is going to go out and put all the bits in place that are needed for Replicator to work on that web application. It's going to create a couple of virtual directories, which I talked about in my previous quick take about installing Replicator, and it's just going to run through that, deploy some solutions, and create some web application, or create some virtual directories. Okay. So while we're waiting for that side, what I'll do is I'll go over to this other side, which is the same. And when you're doing this, you have to do that first step on, I just did that on farm A. Okay. I also want to do the same thing on my other farm. So if you have 2 farms or 5 farms or 50 farms, you need to do this step for each one before you can even attempt to set up a connection to that farm. All right. So we're going to go back in here. And again, we see on this side I've already enabled it, so I won't go through that process again. And we're just waiting for those to complete. There we go. And here we go. So this one's also already enabled. I'm not going to go through that process again. So we're going to go back to application management, and I'll talk to you about groups. Wow. Okay, so while that's loading up, so what is a group? So a group in Replicator is basically, it's a grouping of farm connections. And what those groups allow you to do is do some traffic management, basically. So I'm going to go in and we'll take a look here. Out of the box, you're going to have one group that's created whenever you install the product. It's just called the worldwide connections. And that, by default, is also set in direct mode. In my environment, I have it set in adaptive. I just wanted to display the idea that there's 2 different modes to replication. So there's direct and there's adaptive. Direct mode, the one that we're talking about today, is basically a classic point-to-point communication. So whenever you're setting up Replicator, whether you have 5 farms to talk to or just one other farm, this farm will talk to that farm and that farm only. So it's a discrete pipe that those 2 connections are the only 2 farms that know about each other. In adaptive mode, it's a little bit different, where adaptive is made to be a full mesh. So all servers in all farms know about the servers in the other farms, and they can actually pull data back and forth. And we'll be doing a separate quick take on adaptive mode to explain that further. Okay. All right. So why would you use one group versus another group? Why would you use a couple of groups? A good example in my own environment here is I wanted to set up a couple of map families that only did one-way replication, and then I wanted one that did 2-way. So I created myself a group called 2-way to handle the 2-way replication. And the reason you would create that second group is, let me open up the group here. All right. is you can control what connections are in that group. So for example, if I wanted a one-way group on my source farm, so support 2010A, I would put my connection, which we'll see next, into my group. And then on support 2010B, I would have no connection in my group. I would actually, if I wanted this to be one way, I would just take that connection out of the group. Okay? And what that does is basically events can come in, be applied on the map family, but no events can ever go out because it doesn't have any connections to go out on. And we'll see where the group gets selected in the map family as well, and that should help make it clear. So some of the things that you can do, and I'm going to actually do a new group here so you can see the options. And we'll call this one the one-way group. Okay. So you just give it a friendly name, to tell it what purpose. I guess you use it for what purpose the group is going to be used for. You select a mode. There's only two: direct and adaptive. You can choose to automatically add new groups or enable custom binding. What custom binding is if you're going to be replicating between two farms where on farm A, the relative URL might be site A, but on the destination you may want that relative URL to be replicating to somewhere different, like sites subsite 1, or / subsite 2, / destination, and you need to enable custom binding to do that so that you can set up that connection to a different URL on the destination. Okay. Then you select what connections you want in your group. In this case, since it's a one-way group and I am on the destination, in this case, I would leave all my connections out of this group. And then here it'll list, if you have this associated with any map families, when you come back into here later, it'll actually show you what map families that group is associated with. Okay. All right, and we're running pretty fast here, so I got to go to the next stage pretty quick. We're going to go to application management. And then the next thing you have to do is create your connection. And as a note for groups as well, like I was saying, if you have several servers or several farms, I should say, you need to create those same groups you're going to be using on all of those farms. We don't replicate the group automatically for you. Okay. So next thing that you have to do on each side is create the connections. And what this connection is really is just the information that this side, in this case this is support 2010B, this is the information that I need to talk to my other farm, so support 2010A. So quite simply, it's just the connection information to talk to that destination. Okay, and again, this is a friendly name. You give it a friendly name, you choose what transport setting, and there is a couple of transport settings which I won't cover for just an interest of time, but they are covered in the application manual. You select your target web application. So there's two protocols we talk over, HTTP, HTTPS, and you choose the DNS name for that farm, the port, the domain, username, and password. And then, always go ahead and hit test. Okay, and you should get it succeeded. Now, a lot of common problems, are with this connection where it cannot connect, but there's usually a really good error message that gives you a good idea of why you're unable to connect. So, for example, let's do a quick one here. If you enter in the wrong, the wrong connection information, it'll tell you, web exception, 401 unauthorized. So that'll tell you right away, okay, whatever credentials I just put in are not the correct credentials. I need to try it again. Okay. There can also be, Another common error is maybe typing in the DNS name wrong. We'll do another test, and that gives you a name resolution failure, so it couldn't actually find it. You'll see name resolution failures if you haven't set up your AMS properly, if the DNS record's not there for the farm, etc. Okay. Other things that can cause connection problems that are worth talking about are we do not replicate over a proxy currently. We don't support a proxy, so the user that you're running us as has to be excluded from the proxy completely for replication to function. Okay, that's another one to know. There's a flag here to ignore remote certificate errors. If you're using HTTPS and whenever you're going to that site, you get the red screen up here in the title bar, that's what we call a validation error. You can actually check that to basically skip that and continue to the site. Okay. All right. Then down here you have to pick which group this connection is going to be part of. In our case, I only have it in my two-way group for the time being because I was doing bidirectional replication. Okay. And then we go to the conflict settings, and this is actually covered fairly well in the guide, so I'm going to skip over this section for this. There is some compression options, and by default it's compressed, which is just your normal zip format. There's also the option to do none, which whenever you're using hardware accelerators is a good option. Okay. Whenever you're using, as I was mentioning before about the DC, the differencing compression, block level compression, what this does is when you're using this mode for the for communication or for the connection, it will basically, on the source, it will create a signature file. It'll send that signature file to the destination. The destination will take a look at the same document or item on the destination, create its own signature file, do a comparison, and then send back to the source a needs list telling it what blocks it doesn't have or have changed since the last replication. And then it'll just send, the source will just send that particular block or set of blocks. It's a big, it is a big traffic saver. But it does it's a little bit more resource intensive because of all the comparisons that have to be done. So your processor will take a little bit more of a hit, but you will save on what you're sending over the network. Okay. Okay. So down in the transport settings, by default we have bits high priority, which is a when bits is in high priority mode, it'll basically do everything that a normal network application will do. It will push and pull as much data as it can over the network connection without regard of any other network apps trying to use that same pipe. If you put it down to normal priority, bits will actually automatically throttle up and down based on network availability. It'll use up whatever is available, but if another app is actually trying to use network bandwidth, it'll scale itself back so that it's not using as much. Default, we use high priority. If you're using Kerberos, you want to check the Kerberos flag. And there's a couple modes. Really, the out-of-the-box on-demand is for 99% of clients. They use the on-demand, and that is the on-demand mode is actually as things happen, they're packaged and sent. That's basically the on-demand. Poll mode, it'll check before it tries to send anything. It'll basically poll. In firewalled mode, like I was talking about earlier, is if you're in firewalled and you only have that one-way connection. So one side will do all of the chatter. Okay. And replication monitor update level. Basically, we have minimal and we have normal. And what minimal is whenever Replicator is doing, talking, traffic, etc., sending packages back and forth. It sends a lot of updates about what's happening with the package. Like, okay, I've received the package. I'm starting to transfer the package. Okay, the package is done transferring. Those type of messages go back and forth between the farms. If you want to minimize that kind of chatter, you can set your monitor level to minimal, and it'll only send back the really important requests, like, okay, I have the package, and okay, I'm done applying the package, basically. Okay. And again, here's where I mentioned before, those same package process settings that we were talking about up at the web application level, you can do for a specific connection. And so that'll just affect that connection. So if you have 30 farms and you want to isolate one farm, for example, you don't want any more outbounds going to it, or you want no inbounds coming in from it, you can do that based just on the farm connection that you set up. Okay. You also have the ability to encrypt replication packages. If you want further security, you can click this and provide a password, and we'll encrypt those packages based on that. Now, this password and confirm password needs to be same on both sides. You'll need to set that up. Okay, and these have to do with adaptive, so we won't cover these today since we're talking just about direct mode. Okay, so we've basically done step 1, 2, and 3. Step 1 is enabling the web application. Step 2 is defining your connections if you need to use a different connection group than what's already provided. And we've also done step 3, which is create the connection. And so again, the connection is just that that connection to the other farm. So those 3 steps have to be done on all farms before we do this next step. So all farms that are going to be a part of this replication, you want to have done these 3 steps on. Okay. Now the last step is creating a map family, and we're going to have to go through this one fairly quickly since I'm running a little over. So what a map family is once all those connections are in place, the map family itself is what tells you what web applications you're going to replicate, what sites you're going to replicate, you know, all of that information. Okay, so let's just set up a new one. It'll be the easiest way to do it. Okay, so whenever you're creating a map family, you first have to give it a friendly name. So I'm just going to call this one all, because I'm going to replicate everything in my farm for this web application. Okay. For the map family scope, you have 3 options. You can choose web application, site collection, and website. And what you can do is, if you only want a specific website in your entire farm, you can do that. Or you can set up multiple map families. You're not limited to one. You can have map families that do specific site collections, then specific websites, or you can have all your map families be all website replication. In our case, we're going to do web application, which is the very top level. Okay. We're going to select our group, which in this case is 2A direct. Okay, and you'll see the mode down here. If it was adaptive, if the group was an adaptive mode group, you would see adaptive. And I'm going to choose to replicate changes immediately. You can also schedule out for whatever you need. Okay, so that first step, it's going to create my map family, and then we're going to bring up another screen here, and it's going to give you the option to choose what events you actually want to replicate. Okay, so this screen you choose if you want to enable that map family, enable the maps that inherit from that map family. And here's where you can select all the different events. And we'll have another quick take about maps as well, because there's a lot to think about with maps. This is just a basic one. If you click the advanced, you can see the different events that Replicator is capable of replicating. And by default, we've selected the ones that are most common. workflow by default is not selected. Okay. So for example, if I only wanted list adds and list updates, and I don't want any list deletes to happen, I just have to select those two, and that'll inherit from this point down. So from the web application to all my subsites under that web application, only those events will be captured. Okay. And then this just shows you the connections that are available in that group that we selected previously. So right now we only have the one called to home, which is fine. And then under advanced settings, there's this concept of column matching, which is covered in the guide, but in a nutshell, column matching is if we want to match on title and created date. By default, it's off because we match internally on other keys, but there are certain circumstances where you may need that option. But support will most likely tell you when that needs to be turned on. Okay, so after I've got everything selected, I'm going to click OK, and that's going to create my map family. So that map family is going to flow to all the other sides where I have my connections set up. So all the connections that I have set up, it's going to, that map family is going to flow out, and that map's going to be available everywhere. After that's done, you're now replicating, and that's how you set up a replicator to replicate bidirectionally in direct mode. All right. Thank you for your time, and this video will be posted within a few hours to the knowledge base site. So please review anytime and send us any kind of feedback on this particular video. Okay. Thank you for your time.